The wind howled through the broken remains of the alien city. Tall towers, once proud and shining, now stood like skeletons against the gray sky. The ground was covered in ash and dust, with broken machines and rusted metals scattered everywhere. No one lived here anymore. Or at least that's what people believed. But Harold, an old human man with a long gray beard and tired eyes, knew better. He was a scavenger. For years, he had searched these ruins, looking for anything useful: tools, metals, old tech that could still work. That's how he survived. He didn't have anyone waiting for him. His family was gone. The war between humans and aliens had taken them long ago. Harold moved slowly, his heavy boots crunching over the debris. His old rifle hung on his back, just in case. The city was dead, but sometimes wild creatures roamed here, hungry and dangerous. Suddenly, Harold stopped. His sharp eyes caught something moving between two collapsed walls. It was quick, like a shadow, but he saw it. What was that? He whispered to himself. He stayed still, watching carefully. Then he heard a soft sound, almost like a faint cry. It was weak, but it was there. Harold stepped closer, his hand resting on his rifle, just in case. He moved aside some broken metal pieces and peered into the dark space between the walls. There, curled up in the dirt, was a small creature. At first, Harold thought it might be an animal. But then he saw her face. It was a little girl, an alien girl. Her skin was pale, almost glowing faintly, and her body was thin, like she hadn't eaten in days. She had big, dark eyes that looked too large for her small face. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and she shook from the cold. She stared at Harold with fear and sadness, too weak to run or even cry out loud. Harold frowned. He had seen many things in his life, but this was different. She was just a child, but she wasn't human. And yet, she looked so helpless. "Hey there. What are you doing here all alone?" Harold asked softly. The girl didn't answer. She just watched him, her body still trembling. Harold sighed. He knew he couldn't just leave her. But he also knew the dangers. Many aliens hated humans, and humans didn't trust aliens either. Taking her with him could bring trouble. But his heart ached seeing her like this. Slowly, Harold opened his bag and pulled out a small packet of dried food and a bottle of water. He placed them on the ground and pushed them gently toward her. "Here, eat something. You look like you're starving." For a moment, the girl didn't move. Then, with shaky hands, she reached out and grabbed the food. She tore the packet open and began eating quickly, like she hadn't tasted food in weeks. She drank the water too, gulping it down. Desperately, Harold watched her in silence. She was just a child, yet life had already been cruel to her. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, but still, she didn't answer. Maybe she didn't understand him. Or maybe she couldn't speak at all. Harold sat down nearby, keeping his distance. He didn't want to scare her. He knew trust took time. He looked around the ruined city and shook his head. "How long have you been hiding here?" he muttered. "Poor thing, no one deserves this." The girl finished eating, then looked at Harold with her big eyes. There was still fear, but now a hint of curiosity too. No one had ever helped her before. Why was this human giving her food? Why didn't he hurt her like others? Harold smiled a little. "Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "I've lost people too. I know how it feels to be alone." The girl tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand his words. Then she tried to stand but stumbled, her legs too weak, without thinking. Harold moved forward and caught her before she fell. She froze in his arms, but Harold held her gently. "Easy now. You're too weak to stand," he said. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. She had never felt this kind of kindness before. Slowly, she stopped shaking. Harold sighed. He knew what he had to do. "I can't leave you here, kid. You'll die if I do. I'll find a safe place for you, somehow." The girl didn't speak. But she didn't resist either. She simply let herself rest in Harold's arms. As the wind blew through the ruins, Harold stood up, carrying the small alien girl carefully. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't even know if he was making the right choice. But he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't abandon her. Not now. Not ever. And so the old human and the lonely alien child began their journey together, through a broken world that had forgotten them both. Harold carried the little alien girl carefully as he walked through the empty streets. She was so light. It felt like carrying a bundle of sticks. The old man glanced down at her face. She was asleep now, her head resting against his chest. But even in sleep, she looked worried, her tiny forehead creased, her thin lips trembling. Harold felt his heart grow heavy. No child, human or alien, should ever look that sad. He remembered the old shelter he used when resting. It wasn't much, just a half-broken building with a roof still holding up. But it was safer than staying outside. He hurried his steps, the wind growing colder around him. Finally, Harold pushed open the cracked door and stepped inside. Dust danced in the air, and the room smelled of old metal and rust. He gently laid the girl on a dusty mat in the corner. She stirred but didn't wake. Harold sat near her, watching her sleep. She was strange, yet familiar. Her skin had a soft glow under the dim light, and her hair was silver like moonlight. But what haunted him most were her eyes. Those eyes had stared at him not with hate or fear, but with a hunger so deep, it was like staring into a bottomless well. She wasn't just starving for food. She was starving for safety, for kindness, for life itself. Harold shook his head and sighed. "What mess have I gotten myself into, old man?" he whispered. Still, deep inside, he knew he couldn't walk away. He took out some food from his sack: dried fruits, a few protein bars, and more water. Then he waited for her to wake up. Hours passed. Night fell, bringing cold and darkness. Harold lit a small fire using broken wood and scraps. He sat close, the warmth helping his old bones. Then he heard it. A soft sound, a whimper. Harold turned. The girl was awake. She looked around, eyes wide and afraid. She backed up against the wall, staring at Harold with those same starving eyes. They seemed to ask, "Where am I? Who are you? Why didn't you leave me?" Harold raised his hands gently. "Easy now, kid. You're safe here. I brought you some food." He picked up a piece of fruit and placed it in front of her. She watched his every move, not blinking. "See? Not poison. I'll eat first, if you don't trust me." Harold bit the fruit and chewed slowly, showing her it was safe. Then he placed the rest back in front of her. She stared a little longer, then crawled forward slowly, grabbed the fruit with both hands, and ate greedily. She didn't even care about the taste. She just needed to fill the empty space inside. Her. Harold watched quietly. His heart ached for her. After finishing, she reached for the water, drinking it in gulps. Some spilled down her chin, but she didn't stop. "Slow down, kid," Harold chuckled softly. "You'll choke." She paused and looked at him, unsure. She didn't understand his words, but his tone was gentle. "What's your name, little one?" Harold asked again. She didn't reply. Maybe she didn't know human language. Or maybe she was just too scared to speak. Harold sighed. "I can't just keep calling you kid. How about Lyra?" "Yeah, Lyra. That suits you." The girl tilted her head slightly. Harold smiled. "Lyra it is, then." For a while, they just sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Lyra kept glancing at Harold, her eyes still unsure but softer now. She didn't try to run. She didn't scream. She was watching, learning. Harold pointed to himself. "Harold, that's me, Harold." Then he pointed to her. "Lyra." She blinked. Then, in a soft whisper, barely audible, she tried to copy. "Oh, Lyra." Harold's eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned. You can talk. Lyra flinched a little, scared by his excitement, but Harold quickly calmed his voice. Easy, easy. It's okay. You did great. She looked down, shy and uncertain. But Harold smiled warmly. You're stronger than you look, kid. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from outside. Metal crashing. Heavy footsteps. Harold froze. He grabbed his rifle and stood up, signaling Lyra to stay quiet. She hugged her knees, eyes wide in fear. Harold peeked through a crack in the wall. 3 figures moved outside, scavengers like him, but dangerous ones. Thieves who would kill. For food or supplies. If they found Lyra, they'd either sell her or kill her. She was just another alien thing to them. Harold cursed under his breath. He couldn't let them find her. He turned to Lyra. We need to be quiet, okay? Stay here. Don't make a sound. She nodded, understanding the danger in his voice. Harold readied his rifle, his old hand steady despite his age. He wasn't about to let anyone hurt her. Not after what she'd been through. Outside, the voices grew louder. The scavengers laughed and argued, their footsteps approaching. Harold's finger hovered over the trigger. He hoped they would pass, but if they didn't, he was ready. He looked back at Lyra one last time. Her starving eyes stared at him, full of trust now, not just hunger. For the first time in years, Harold felt something he thought he'd lost: purpose. Harold stayed still, his back pressed against the cracked wall, rifle tight in his hands. Outside, the scavengers' voices echoed, rough and loud. They joked, kicked debris, and talked about stealing whatever was left in the ruins. Did you hear? One of them said. They say there's an alien kid running around here. Some species fetch a high price if they're still alive. Bah, probably dead already. Another laughed. No alien brat lasts long without food. Harold's jaw tightened. His finger hovered on the trigger. He glanced behind him, where the little alien girl Lyra sat quietly, her big eyes filled with fear, but no sound escaped her lips. She clutched her knees, hiding in the shadowy corner, trembling softly. He faced the door again. Part of him wanted to fire, to fight them off. But there were 3 of them, and he was just one old man. If they fought here, Lyra might get caught in the crossfire. He couldn't let that happen. Minutes passed like hours, but finally, the scavengers. Footsteps grew faint. Their voices faded until only the cold wind remained. Harold waited longer, just to be sure. Then he lowered his rifle and sighed with relief. They're gone, for now. Lyra remained still, watching him closely. Harold saw it in her eyes, the silent question. Why? Why did you protect me? He sat down with a groan, his old bones aching. He looked straight at her. You're wondering why I'm helping you, aren't you? Hunt you, he muttered. Truth is, I don't know myself. Harold rubbed his face with his hands. His mind was full of memories he tried to forget. A long time ago, he had a family. A daughter about Lyra's age when she died in the war. She had laughed, played, and called him Papa. But war took everything from him: his home, his family, his purpose. Maybe that's why he couldn't leave Lyra behind. Maybe that's why those starving eyes haunted him so deeply. He looked at her again. You remind me of someone I lost. Someone I couldn't save. Lyra didn't understand all his words, but she understood his tone. She stared, then slowly crawled a little closer, still cautious but curious. Harold chuckled softly. You're brave, little one. She stopped at a safe distance and tilted her head. Then she whispered, Pa. Pa. Harold's heart stopped. For a moment, did she just say that? No. I'm not your papa, he said quickly, but his voice cracked. Lyra looked confused, then pointed to him. Pa. Pa. Harold shook his head, but inside, something broke. That small voice, that word, it was the first real thing she had said. It hit him harder than any bullet. He stared at the floor for a while. The room was quiet, except for the wind. Then, he made up his mind. "All right, Lyra, I'll take you with me," he said firmly. "You can't survive here, not alone. I've got a place." "A safe place." Lyra's eyes widened. "But you gotta trust me, okay? We have to be careful. There are bad people out here." She didn't answer, but she didn't back away either. Slowly, she nodded. Harold smiled weakly. "Good girl." He stood up and packed his things. He had some food left, water, tools, and his rifle. Not much, but enough to survive the journey. He looked at Lyra. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand, her legs shaking like thin sticks. She stumbled, but Harold caught her before she fell. "Guess not yet," he muttered. He carefully lifted her onto his back. She was so light, like carrying a feather. She rested her head on his shoulder, her tiny hands gripping his shirt. "Hold on tight, kid. We've got a long way to go." Harold stepped out of the shelter, his eyes scanning the ruins. The sky was dark, clouds heavy, and the air smelled of dust and metal. But he didn't care. He had made his decision. He was no longer just a scavenger. He was a guardian now. As he walked, Harold talked softly, as if telling stories to a child. "Where?" "We're going. There's trees, real trees, not metal ones. There's a river too. You'll like it. You can play there, eat real food, and sleep without fear." Lyra didn't reply, but her breathing was calm. She was listening. For the first time in years, Harold felt a spark of life inside him. A reason to keep moving forward. He promised himself one thing: he would not fail this time. He would protect her, no matter the cost. The lonely creature wasn't alone anymore. Harold walked carefully through the ruined city, his steps slow but steady. On his back, little Lyra held tightly to his shoulders. Her small fingers gripped his worn-out coat, her head resting gently between his shoulder blades. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. But Harold could feel her heart beating fast, as if afraid that danger would come any second. The sky was dark, clouds heavy with ash and smoke. Every corner of the broken city looked the same: buildings half collapsed, streets covered in dust, and the air filled with silence. Yet Harold knew this place like the back of his hand. Years of scavenging had taught him every safe path, every hidden tunnel. But this time, he wasn't just searching for scrap. This time, he was trying to save a life. Harold glanced around, his rifle ready. He knew the scavengers might still be nearby, and there were worse things: too, wild creatures, machines that had gone mad after the war, and sometimes other survivors who had lost their humanity. But the weight of Lyra on his back made him feel stronger. She trusted him now. He couldn't fail her. "You still holding on, kid?" Harold asked softly as he walked. He felt a gentle squeeze on his shoulder. She didn't speak, but that was her way of answering. He smiled. "Good. Just a bit further." Hours passed. Harold stopped only to let Lyra drink some water and eat a few pieces of dried fruit. She was still weak, but her eyes looked brighter now. She watched everything around her, curious but cautious. As the sun began to set, Harold decided to rest. He found an old bus, half buried under debris. The roof was still intact, so it could serve as shelter for the night. He carefully helped Lyra down and placed her on a seat. She looked around, her eyes wide. She had probably never seen such a thing before. Harold chuckled. This was called a bus, kid. Humans used it to travel together. Now it's just another broken thing. Lyra touched the dusty seats, her fingers tracing the fabric as if it was treasure. Harold sat across from her, pulling out some food from his bag. He handed her a piece of bread, and this time she ate slower, watching Harold as she chewed. "You're learning fast," he said with a grin. Lyra smiled faintly, a shy expression that made Harold's old heart warm. After they ate, Harold leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. But he couldn't relax fully. The city was dangerous at night. Lyra sat quietly, but then she pointed to the rifle beside Harold. What? she whispered. Harold opened his eyes, surprised. You want to know what this is? She nodded. This is a rifle. It's for protection. To keep bad things away. Lyra tilted her head. Bad things? Harold sighed. Yeah, bad people. Bad creatures. The world's full of them now. Lyra's smile faded. She hugged her knees again, remembering the fear she had felt alone in the city. Harold noticed and softened his voice. But don't worry. As long as I'm around, I won't let them touch you. She looked at him with those big dark eyes, full of questions she couldn't yet ask. Suddenly, a distant sound made Harold freeze. Footsteps. Heavy ones. More than one. Harold grabbed his rifle quietly and motioned Lyra to stay down. She obeyed, hiding under the seat. He peeked out the broken window. 3 figures walked down the street, armed, rough-looking men. Scavengers. Damn, Harold muttered. He couldn't let them find the bus. He turned to Lyra. Stay here. Be silent, no matter what. She nodded, her little hands trembling. Harold slipped out the back of the bus, moving like a shadow. His old body still knew how to hide, how to stay quiet. He watched the men from a distance. I heard there's a live alien kid around here, one of them said. Boss wants her alive. Another spat on the ground. If I find her, I'll kill the human helping her too. Harold's grip tightened on his rifle, but then Lyra did something Harold didn't expect. She peeked from the bus, watching them too. Suddenly, her eyes glowed faintly, and Harold felt a strange hum in the air. Before he could stop her, Lyra whispered something in her alien tongue. The air shifted. A wave of energy, soft but clear, spread around the area. The scavengers stopped, walking, blinking in confusion. What's that noise? One muttered. Another held his head. I feel dizzy. Within moments, all 3 of them collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Harold stared, stunned. He rushed back to the bus. Lyra was sitting quietly, her glow fading. Lyra. What did you just do? He whispered. She looked up, eyes wide. Safe now, Papa. Harold didn't know whether to feel amazed or worried. She had powers, strange, quiet powers. And she used them to protect both of them. He smiled, shaking his head. You're full of surprises, kid. She smiled back, proud. Harold knew now the journey would be even more dangerous than he thought. People would come for her powers, but he also knew one thing for sure. They would survive. Together. As the night grew colder, Harold sat close to Lyra, his rifle by his side, and whispered, Tomorrow we keep moving. We'll find home, I promise. Lyra leaned against him, her eyes finally closing in peace. And so, their journey had truly begun. Morning arrived with a pale light creeping through the broken windows of the old bus. Harold stirred awake, his back aching from sleeping against the cold metal seat. But before he could move, he felt a small weight resting against his arm. It was Lyra curled up beside him, her little hands clutching his coat. Harold smiled softly. She was finally sleeping peacefully, her face calm and warm. Last night, she had shown him her strange power, some sort of energy that knocked those scavengers unconscious. She had saved them both. But that also meant one thing. She was special, and the world was never kind to those who were special. Harold carefully stood up without waking her. He stepped outside the bus, stretching his stiff legs. The city was still and quiet, but Harold's instincts screamed that danger was coming. He didn't need proof. He just knew. As he scanned the horizon, he noticed deep footprints on the ground. Larger than a human's, he bent down, examining them closely. There were claw marks in the dirt beside them. Damn, he muttered. Hunters. Hunters weren't ordinary scavengers. They were mercenaries, half human, half machine, some even alien themselves. They tracked anything that could be sold for profit, and they never stopped until their prey was caught or dead. If they knew about Lyra, It was only a matter of time before they found her. Harold returned inside and gently shook Lyra awake. Come on, kid, we have to move. Lyra rubbed her eyes, still sleepy. Why? Hunters are close, Harold said. We stay here, we die. She didn't fully understand, but she trusted him. She stood, still weak, but stronger than before. Harold packed their things quickly and helped her onto his back again, as they moved through the ruins. Harold thought of his safe house far beyond the city's edge. A small cabin near the forest, hidden from the eyes of men and machines. If he could get Lyra there, she'd be safe. But reaching it would take 2 more days of walking, and that was if no one stopped them. But Harold wasn't lucky. By midday, he heard them. The mechanical whir of limbs, heavy boots crushing debris, and deep voices speaking in alien tongues. The hunters had arrived. Harold ducked behind a collapsed building, peeking through a crack. He saw 3 hunters, 2 tall, armored figures with glowing red eyes, and 1 short but fast-looking alien with sharp claws and a breathing mask. One of them held a device, scanning the area. Life signs detected, the machine-like voice growled. Close. The child is near. Harold's heart pounded. He looked back at Lyra. She sat quietly, sensing the tension. We can't fight them, Harold whispered, but we can outsmart them. He remembered the old sewage tunnels beneath the city. They were dark, filthy, and half-flooded, but no tracker could get a clear signal underground. Hold on tight, Lyra, we're going underground. She nodded, trusting him. Harold dashed from his hiding place, running fast through narrow alleys. The sound of his boots echoed, and soon the hunters heard it. There, the human. Shots fired, laser bolts cutting through the air, striking walls and metal. But Harold was fast for his age. He slid down a slope into a hidden opening, rusted sewer gate half buried in rubble. He pushed the gate open and slipped inside. Just as a laser blast scorched the ground behind him, the darkness swallowed them. Whole, the air smelled of damp and rot. Water dripped from above and rats scurried away. Lyra clung to Harold, trembling. It's all right, kid, he whispered, catching his breath. We're safe down here for now. Above them, the hunters stopped at the entrance. He escaped into the tunnels, one growled. The scanners are weak underground. Proceed with caution. Harold heard their voices fading, but he knew they wouldn't give up. He lit a small flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. The tunnel stretched far, twisting like a snake. We follow this path, Harold told Lyra. If we're lucky, it'll lead us out of the city. They walked for hours, the air getting colder, the water deeper in some parts. But Lyra didn't complain. She was strong in her own way. At one point, Harold stopped to rest. Lyra sat beside him, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness. Why, they follow us, she asked softly. Harold looked at her sadly. Because you're special. And the world doesn't like special things. She lowered her head. I'm bad? Harold shook his head. No, Lyra, you're not bad. You're precious. And precious things are rare. That's why I have to protect you. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. Papa, strong. Harold chuckled. Strong enough, I hope. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the tunnel, metal on metal. The hunters had found their trail. Harold stood up fast. We have to move now. Lyra stood too, but then something inside her stirred. Her body glowed faintly again, and the air around them seemed to hum. Lyra, what are you doing? Harold whispered. She closed her eyes, focused, and whispered strange words in her alien language. A pulse of light spread down the tunnel, vanishing into the dark dot far behind them. The hunters stumbled, clutching their heads. Their scanners blinked. Confused and jammed. The child interfering with our systems, one hissed. Lyra opened her eyes, panting. She was tired but smiled. Safe, for now. Harold stared, amazed. You're full of tricks, aren't you? She giggled softly. Harold smiled back. Come on, clever girl. Let's get you home. With that, they pressed on, deeper into the tunnel. The hunters left confused in the shadows, but Harold knew they would come again, and when they did, he'd be ready. The tunnels were cold, damp, and endless. Water dripped from above, echoing like distant whispers in the dark. Harold's flashlight flickered weakly, its light barely holding back the gloom. Lyra walked beside him now. She had refused to be carried any further. She wanted to walk even, though her legs still wobbled. She didn't want to be a burden, not after everything Harold had done. Harold glanced at her, impressed by her determination. Her small feet splashed in the shallow water, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dark. "You're a stubborn one, huh?" he whispered with a small smile. Lyra looked up, confused by the word, but when she saw Harold's grin, she smiled back. For a brief moment, it felt like they were not running for their lives. It felt normal, but the peace didn't last. A deep vibration rolled through the ground. Harold stopped, his eyes narrowing. "Damn! They're using ground scanners," he muttered. Lyra looked around, sensing it too. The hum in the air wasn't natural. It felt heavy, dangerous. "We have to move faster," Harold said. Picking up his pace, they turned corner after corner, but the tunnels all looked the same: wet walls, rusted pipes, and shadows that seemed alive. Suddenly, a sharp metallic sound rang out behind them. The hunters had caught up. Red lights cut through the darkness as the hunters entered the tunnel, their mechanical limbs clanking with every step. "There!" one of them shouted. "The child! The human!" Harold spun around, raising his rifle. He fired a shot, the blast echoing loudly. The bullet struck the metal chest of a hunter, but it barely flinched. "Run, Lyra!" Harold shouted, but before she could move, the smallest hunter, the alien, with claws and a breathing mask, leaped forward, faster than Harold expected. It knocked the rifle from his hands and grabbed Lyra by her arm. She screamed, struggling, but the hunter's grip was strong. "We have her." The alien snarled, "She fetch a fortune." Harold lunged forward, punching the alien, but it was no use. The hunter's claw slashed across Harold's chest, sending him crashing into the tunnel wall. He groaned, pain shooting through his body. He was too old, too weak to fight them like this. Lyra cried, kicking and hitting, but the alien just laughed. "You're just a weak little thing. Stop fighting." But then something changed. Lyra stopped struggling. Her eyes, once full of fear, now burned with a strange light. A soft hum vibrated through the air. The hunter frowned. "What?" Lyra whispered in her alien language, her voice calm but firm. The glow around her body grew brighter, spreading from her skin like waves of light. Suddenly, the hunter holding her screamed. His hands began to burn, smoke rising from his flesh as if he was touching fire. "What is this?" The alien shrieked, dropping Lyra. She fell to the ground but stood. Quickly, her body was glowing fully now, her hair floating as if lifted by a breeze that wasn't there. The air around her shimmered, vibrating like soundless music. The other two hunters stepped back, raising their weapons. "Careful, she's activating." One shouted, but it was too late. Lyra raised her small hands, palms open. A wave of pure energy burst from her like a silent explosion. It was light, but it carried weight and invisible force that slammed into the hunters, sending them flying backward like ragdolls. Their mechanical limbs sparked, their systems glitching. They hit the walls hard, groaning in pain. Harold watched in awe, his mouth open. He had never seen anything like this. This wasn't just some alien child, she was something more. Lyra's glow softened as she turned to Harold, her body swaying. With exhaustion, she smiled faintly. "Safe." "Papa," she whispered before collapsing. "Lyra." Harold crawled to her, checking her pulse. She was alive, just tired, her body cold but breathing. He gathered her in his arms, standing up slowly. The hunters weren't dead. but they were down too damaged to follow. Harold looked at them with a grim face. "If you come after her again, I won't miss next time." He carried Lyra deeper into the tunnel, the path ahead uncertain, but his mind clear. Lyra wasn't just special, she was powerful. Too powerful for any normal species. She had abilities that others would kill to possess or control, but to Harold, she was just a little girl who needed a home. A family. As he walked, he whispered softly to her cell. "Eeping face, don't worry, kid, I'll get you out of here. I'll keep you safe, I swear." Above ground, the city was quiet again, but the word would spread soon. Others would hear of the glowing child with the power to break machines, but Harold didn't care. He would protect her, no matter who came next, because for the first time since his family died, Harold felt alive again. He wasn't just a scavenger anymore. He was her protector. Harold pushed forward, each step heavier than the last. His arms carried Lyra's small body, her head resting against his chest. She was still asleep, her glowing power faded, but her breathing was steady. Above ground, the city's shadows began to thin. For the first time in days, Harold saw the first signs of morning light breaking through the clouds of ash. After miles of darkness and danger, they finally emerged from the tunnels. Harold climbed through a broken steel hatch and stepped onto a grassy hill, one of the few places where the war hadn't turned the earth to dust. The air here was cleaner. The sky, though still gray, held patches of pale blue. Trees stood tall ahead, swaying gently in the breeze. In the distance, Harold saw the shape of his old cabin, hidden between thick woods. Just as he remembered. "We made it, kid," Harold whispered, exhausted. "We made it home." Lyra stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked at the sky, confused at first. The dark tunnels were gone. The choking city was gone. Instead, she saw open skies. Birds flying, trees. She looked up at Harold, her voice small but hopeful. "Safe," Harold chuckled softly, despite his tiredness. "Yeah, Lyra, safe." He carried her the rest of the way, finally stepping onto the porch of his cabin. The wood creaked under his boots. He pushed open the old door, and dust floated in the sunlit air. It wasn't much, just a single room with an old bed, a wood stove, and shelves lined with rusty tools and scattered books, but it was a home. And for the first time in years, Harold didn't feel alone in it. He laid Lyra gently on the bed and fetched a blanket, tucking her in carefully. She smiled in her sleep, her hands clutching the edges of the blanket like it was a treasure. Harold sat beside her, watching her breathe, his mind heavy with thoughts. She had powers beyond anything he'd seen. Powers that could draw armies. Scientists, or worse, those who saw her as a weapon, not a child. But to Harold, she wasn't a weapon. She was a scared, lonely girl who just needed someone to care for her. And Harold decided that someone was him. Over the next few days, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Harold cleaned the cabin, repaired the broken stove, and gathered food from the nearby forest. He caught fish from the river, picked wild berries, and even managed to fix an old solar panel to power a few lights. Lyra regained her strength quickly. She explored the small cabin with wonder, touching everything, asking quiet questions in broken human words. "Tree?" she asked once, pointing out the window. Harold smiled. "Yeah, that's a tree. We've got plenty of them here." She giggled, running outside to touch the bark, her fingers tracing the rough surface with fascination. Day by day, her language improved. She learned to say simple things: water, food, papa. That last word always made Harold's heart ache, but also warm. She had chosen to call him Papa, and he never corrected her. In return, he taught her how to fish, how to light a fire, and how to read simple human words from his old books. She was a quick learner, her mind sharp despite the hardship she had faced. Sometimes at night, Lyra's body would glow softly while she slept, as if her power was dreaming with her. Harold watched over her during those nights, rifle beside him, his eyes never closing fully. He knew danger could still come, but the cabin was hidden, deep in the woods, far from the broken cities and greedy hunters. For the first time in years, Harold felt peace. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Harold sat on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. Lyra sat beside him, watching curiously. "What, making?" she asked. Harold chuckled. "A little toy. Used to make them for my daughter. She'd have loved you." Lyra tilted her head. "She gone?" Harold's smile faded. "A little, yeah, long ago." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and held his hand with her tiny fingers. "Me, your family now?" she asked shyly. Harold looked at her, surprised. Then he smiled, tears stinging his eyes. "Yeah, kid. You're my family now." She smiled brightly, resting her head against his arm. They sat like that as the sky turned orange and purple, the stars slowly waking above them. Harold felt it deep inside. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. He had a reason to wake up, a reason to protect, to laugh, to hope. And Lyra wasn't starving anymore. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a home, a guardian, and a place where she could grow. Together, they were something neither of them thought possible, a family. And as the night settled over the forest, the stars watching silently, Harold made a silent vow. No matter who came, no matter the danger, he would protect her. He would protect his daughter, because sometimes family wasn't about blood. It was about a promise. And Harold had made his.